Hello again, 102. In this video, part 1, we will go over some of the major factors that enabled the United States and its allies to win the war in Europe, and what were some of those war aims and strategies. By mid-1942, Americans began to hear good news from the war in Europe. The Grand Alliance, Great Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union, called for the defeat of Germany first. Defeating the Japanese in the Pacific could wait. This is the overarching strategy of the war. And the Russian front is going to be the main focus of the war in Europe. And during 1941 and 42, we hinted at this already, the Nazis and the Soviets waged colossal battles. The Soviet population, by far, bore the brunt of the war against the Nazis, leading Joseph Stalin to insist that the Americans and British attack the Germans in Western Europe, thereby forcing Hitler to pull units away from the Russian front. Meanwhile, with most of the German army deployed on the Russian front, the British and American air forces flying from bases in England would bomb military and industrial targets in German-occupied Western Europe, and especially in Germany itself, while the American and British strategists prepared plans to attack the Nazis in North Africa, Italy, and France. The North Africa campaign. And they will end up taking North Africa in Operation Torch. A little-known United States General, Dwight David Eisenhower, led the assault. Farther east, British armies were pushing the Germans and Italians back across Libya. El Alamein was a famous battle outside near Egypt in this North Africa campaign. The Americans were badly beaten in the early battles, and during the winter and spring of 1943, however, Eisenhower, soon known by his nickname Ike, found a brilliant field commander in General George Patton. Armed with ivory-handled pistols and brimming with bravado, he showed Americans how to fight. And there's a picture of George, and he will be an advocate of speed and daring in tank warfare. He knows the strategies of Erwin Rommel, his counterpart in the German army. And hammered from all sides and unable to retreat, some 250,000 Germans and Italians surrendered on March 12, 1943, leaving all of North Africa in Allied control. 5 months earlier, in January of 1943, Roosevelt, Churchill, and the Anglo-American military chiefs met at the Casablanca Conference. And the British convinced the Americans that they should follow up the anticipated victory in North Africa with an assault on German and Italian forces on the Italian island of Sicily. Roosevelt and Churchill also decided to step up the bombing of Germany and to increase shipments of military supplies to the Soviet Union and the nationalist Chinese forces fighting the Japanese. Before leaving the Casablanca Conference, Roosevelt announced that the war would end only with the unconditional surrender of all enemy nations. This decision was designed to quiet Soviet suspicions that the United States and its allies might negotiate separately with Hitler to end the war. The announcement also reflected Roosevelt's determination that every person in Germany should realize that this time Germany is a defeated nation. And that was one of the things that led to the rise of Hitler. He said that they were robbed at the Versailles Conference and that they really weren't defeated, and most Germans believed that. The Battle of the Atlantic. By July 1942, some 230 Allied ships and almost 5 tons of shipping had been lost. And this was something that really frightened Churchill, the U-boat peril. By the end of 1942, however, the British and Americans discovered ways to defeat the U-boats, and British experts cracked the German naval codes, enabling Allied convoys to steer clear of U-boats or to hunt them down with warplanes called sub-chasers equipped with torpedoes, and new anti-submarine weapons deployed on warships. The new technology also helped. Sonar and radar allowed Allied ships to track submarines. And in May 1943, the Allies destroyed 41 U-boats. Thereafter, the U-boats were on the defensive, and Allied shipping losses fell significantly. In Sicily and Italy, the Allied forces will reclaim Sicily and Italy, and Mussolini flees. He was fired by the king and arrested, and Hitler will send paratroopers to help him escape from jail, and then he will put him in charge of a puppet government in northern Italy. And eventually, though, he is going to be captured by his own people and hung. And on June the 4th, 1944, the Fifth Army will enter Rome. At the Tehran Conference, late in the fall of 1943 in Tehran, Iran, Churchill and Roosevelt had their first joint meeting with Joseph Stalin, and the discussions focused on the planned invasion of Nazi-controlled France and a simultaneous Russian offensive westward across Eastern Europe. The three leaders agreed to create an international organization, the United Nations, to maintain peace after the war. And that's the basic answer to the efforts of President Roosevelt and the Allies to shape the post-war world. They were hoping that this organization would be able to help maintain the peace. And there's not been any major wars, but its effectiveness has been mixed. More on that in the last video of this chapter. The strategic bombing of Europe will not really shatter German morale or war production. Many of the bombs missed their targets because of clouds, high winds, and inaccurate navigational systems. The massive Allied bombing campaign, however, did force the Germans to commit precious resources to air raid defense, and it eventually wears down the Air Force. And with the Allied air supremacy over Europe assured by 1944, the much anticipated invasion of Hitler's Fortress Europe could now move forward. And planning the invasion would take place in London. And Dwight David Eisenhower will have a new title. He is now the Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, and his SHAEF headquarters, the Supreme Headquarters of the Allied Expeditionary Force, will plan Operation Overlord. And this is the daring assault on Hitler's Atlantic Wall, a formidable array of fortifications, mines, machine guns, barbed wire, and jagged beach obstacles along the French coastline. And Operation Overlord succeeded in part because it surprised the German defenders. They made elaborate efforts to conceal where they were going to have the landing. This fooled the Germans. They made misleading public statements. They had a dummy division set up with Patton at its head. Patton did not participate in Operation Overlord. And they believed, Hitler believed as well, that the invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais, which is on the French-Belgian border where the English Channel was narrowest. And directly across from there was where these fake divisions were set up, cardboard tanks and other elaborate things that from the air appeared to be a division of ground troops. Instead, the landings are going to take place at Normandy, almost 200 miles to the south. And as the planes carrying the paratroopers arrived over France, thick clouds and German anti-aircraft fire disrupted the formations. Some soldiers were dropped miles from their landing sites. Some were dropped far out to sea. Some were dropped so low that their parachutes never opened. Yet, the U.S. 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, although badly scattered, outfought 3 German divisions during the chaotic night and prepared the way for the main invasion by destroying bridges and capturing artillery positions and key road junctions. And there's a picture of Eisenhower talking with troops on June 6, 1944, D-Day in Operation Overlord. And here's a picture of the troops coming ashore at Normandy. And this is the key turning point, because now This is not going to be done in a day. We'll finish this up in the next video. But with this establishment of the Western Front, the Germans are going to once again have to fight on two different fronts.